everyone, Sean Applegate from Erwin here, and welcome to Erwin Insights 2020. I'm pleased to introduce today's session, EVO2, What's Data Got to Do with It, with Erwin Vice President of Professional Services, Tony Morrow. Tony, thanks so much for joining us. I'll turn the session over to you.
Thank you, Sean, and welcome everybody. Like Sean said, my presentation is titled, What's Data Got to Do with It? And really what we're talking about in this session today is integrating two common capabilities that we're finding within companies these days. One is enterprise architecture and the other is data governance. We're really trying to explore how the two work together from an integrated manner to benefit both practices as a whole. And really to understand, our line of thinking around these two concepts, we're first going to start off with understanding the overall Erwin journey. And really it starts back in 2016 when Erwin, the data modeler product, divested from CA and was bought out by a venture capitalist firm, starting up the company that we are today called Erwin. And from there, Erwin went on a path of mergers and acquisitions, purchasing companies like Casewise, like Corso, AMP Consulting, and Analytics DS. And really the intention of that acquisition path was so that we could grow our portfolio of applications supporting multiple industry capabilities that we can provide to our customers under one roof. And from that journey, we've really developed these core capabilities that I'm listing out here right now: data governance, enterprise architecture, business process modeling, and data modeling. For one time, in history, all of these capabilities fall within one company, which is now Erwin. And really from that kind of journey of acquiring additional tool sets and merging them into one company, we got lots of customer feedback on how these capabilities work together. And particularly for this presentation, I'm exploring how data governance and enterprise architecture work together as a holistic approach. And it's really with the overarching kind of objective to see how data governance can provide timely value to enterprise architecture initiatives and reduce costs and resource needs to keep those enterprise architectures up to date. So really, our client-driven challenge has been, what is the relationship between these two areas? And most importantly, if there is a true relationship between the two, what's the benefits that we can actually realize as an implementation perspective? And to answer that, we had to really ask ourselves a couple of important questions. One, from an enterprise architecture perspective, what are the true goals and what are the current issues and pain points our clients are facing when it comes to implementations around enterprise architecture programs and projects? The other question is from the data governance perspective, what are the true goals and objectives of a data governance initiative? What is actually being governed and how we can actually utilize that information within enterprise architecture to benefit everybody. And to really start to break that down, we had to take a clear look at what the executives throughout our companies are facing today. And really it starts to focus around things like digital transformation, being able to grow rapidly with all of these disruptive technologies going on around us, really understanding how we can improve customer engagement and work in global operations, and really taking on new ways to make revenue through emerging markets, all at the same time understanding the impacts from items like compliance, regulations, policies, so that we're in compliance with all of the laws and legislation that's going on to date. At the same time, we're also being asked to reduce cost. Not only reduce cost, but increase input. And a lot of those cost-saving initiatives and improvement initiatives are utilizing things like newer technologies that we have to roll into our environments. So these are a lot of complex, challenging items that one, enterprise architects are being asked to support, and two, it's at the top of all of our executives' minds on how they're going to handle those things. So can enterprise architecture actually help in these areas? Absolutely, they can. However, organizations are extremely complex. We document things like products, we document things like applications, technologies, the services that we're delivering to our end customers, the services that we're delivering internally within the company as well. And it becomes very challenging to keep up to date documentation of how things are structured. It's really that traditional as is architecture that starts to slow enterprise architects up. And really, the enterprise architecture function needs to involve lots of stakeholders so that you can keep this information relevant. And we have to maintain the teams and the knowledge around the technologies to push these kind of ideas forward and actually make actionable information. So how do we end up handling all of these complexities of documenting as is architecture while actually not incurring a huge amount of cost, and then being able to do it in a manner that it's continuously up to date? And that's really kind of where we start to see struggles from our enterprise architects, is showing real value while documenting all of this complexity without incurring huge amounts of cost. So there are some undeniable truths about enterprise architecture. One, management doesn't always rely on our enterprise architects or our architecture products. They typically will call in high-paid consultants to consult on industry standards. They'll do some initial assessments and they'll leave behind a PowerPoint presentation that summarizes some recommendations. The other one is that we're now in an ever-changing environment. So more so now, enterprise architects and the architectures have to be constantly updated and ready to go so that people can actually make actionable information about the products and the information that we've been collecting. The other issue is that enterprise architecture is not just about IT. So currently in a lot of organizations, enterprise architecture still lives with an IT focus. So a lot of the times, the IT departments are the ones in charge of keeping that information up to date to where it really should be more of a strategic planning conversation about how those architectures change over time. So what prevents us from being successful within enterprise architecture? First and foremost, a lack of trust in the availability of information. A lot of this information that we put into our EA artifacts takes weeks, months, years to collect and maintain within a single system. If you have a system, a lot of people still use spreadsheets. So people start to not rely on the information we're collecting because one, it could be, dated, or two, it just could be purely incorrect. And that gets into the next one. There's lack of true governance around that information as well. So not only is it complex to collect that information, build out the artifacts and present it, but it's even more complex to keep that information up to date and relevant, through proper governance and collaboration when you have large organizations. And then lastly, and it really ties back to these other two, we lack the practical results we need because the information is not kept up to date or relevant within a specific scenario. Because right now, our architects are being asked to provide on-time analysis so that people can make well-informed decisions based upon the current scenario that's taking place within their environment. As a result, things are taking too long to produce EA value, one producing artifacts, one collecting the information. And as a result, we are not getting buy-in to our EA programs. So in short, we're having failure across enterprise architecture projects, And this is really where we want to try to help by utilizing our data governance capabilities. To fully understand how data governance can actually help an enterprise architecture project, we have to take a look at what is data governance. And data governance is really about understanding all of your data assets within context of how you are using them. So understanding and cataloging what data assets you have, what do those data assets actually contain from a business perspective? Where did it come from? Who has access to it? Where is it transferring over to? All of those little touch points of people, technology, applications that may be touching that information or have access to that information. We need to understand that so that we can put the proper processes and policies around them to properly govern them. Ultimately, this is all with the intention of reducing risk, optimizing operations, and increasing the use of trusted information throughout the organization. So just like enterprise architecture, we're trying to be able to do transformation with the information we're governing. We're trying to reduce risk, and we're trying to increase the use of the appropriate resources that we deem to be a corporate standard. So lots of similar types of information we're collecting within data governance. And specifically for the governance initiative, we're trying to document the complexities of a company's data architecture. So we're trying to understand everything from where we're sourcing information from, what we're doing with that sourced information, and then ultimately where's the end state that we're storing that information. And then not only, where does it lie and rest, but who's using it, who's doing reporting off of it, what information is going outside of the organization. We need to document all of these pieces of information, not only where they lie, but where they're moving to, so we can have complete transparency going across the data pipeline chain. So we wanted to dig a little bit more into that, and to do that, there's two very clear kind of components of documenting a data architecture. One is understanding data at rest, and that is basically where data resides at a stable state. It could be in a relational database, it could be in a non-relational database, it could be a flat file, it could be a CSV file on somebody's machine, but we want to understand what's in that system so that we can document it. And we need to break down the entities, the attributes, the structure, the interrelationships of that information, where it resides, so that we can put business context around it, so that people understand where information is, they can do their compliance checks, they have clear traceability to where specific information resides within their landscape. Now, the other side of that is we need to understand how data moves. So we can understand data at rest, what repository it lives within, but we also need to understand how data is transferring from one system to the next. Not only the fact that there is an exchange of information, but what is the detailed structure of that data in motion? So it's highly important to understand the business information that's being transferred from one system to another and how it transforms either via business rules or ETL logic going across the data landscape. That's the only real way that you can actually govern your data architecture, is through the understanding of your data at rest and your data at motion, and then ultimately being able to put that within a business context. So first documenting that data architecture, and then understanding what you have, but then how your end users would understand how that information exists within your environment. So being able to add on top of not only your data dictionary or the data usage, but also that business glossary to where you can create that business understanding around your information. So in a nutshell, that's really what governance is. It's really kind of understanding your current data assets, your data inventory, being able to understand the architecture and structure of how your company is set up to exchange information, and really understanding the movement of that information in very detailed documentation. So from that standpoint, we've kind of built out an integration going between our data governance platform that documents those pieces of information, and we've been able to integrate that in with our enterprise architecture tool. And the real question is well, how are you going to utilize that information, right? Because within data governance, you're tracking down to the attributes, the column type level of information, and the detailed data flows going between the systems. What are we going to be doing with that information within our enterprise architecture tool? The key thing that we've started to do within our EA platform, utilizing the data governance information, is deriving system interfaces. So one of the big issues I personally have found with doing enterprise architecture is keeping that as is application landscape up to date. And utilizing our data governance information, we can automate the diagrams, the generation of interfaces, the generation of applications, all within the EA platform, just by understanding that data landscape. So we're going to be able to document the data sources, and the systems within our EA tool automatically by just pulling that information in from our governance platform. And really, this starts to create an ecosystem of applications and disciplines that tie together all of the relevant pieces of information. So within our data governance platform, which is actually called the Data Intelligence Suite, we have the function of providing metadata management. From that metadata management function, we can do just what we said, right? We can document the data at rest, we can document the data in motion, we can add business context and govern that information in one platform. But that platform interconnects with our other product platforms to exchange the information that may be relevant to other areas. So just like I mentioned, from the enterprise architecture perspective, we can start to harvest the systems, the mappings, the data exchanges, the compliance items, all into our EA environment that pre-populates our products and keeps that information up to date on a timely basis. So this is a direct connection between our EA capability, our business process capability, and our data governance capability. And we exchange the relevant information that will help you keep your information up to date and, in a sense, start to automate your enterprise architecture activities. And what does this end up making us do? This allows us to make smarter decisions faster. This starts to make our EA products actionable because we're not spending a lot of time updating the information or keeping it relevant. We're actually just consuming the end results and letting the tools do the work for us so that we can spend time making decisions, doing planning, and adding that strategic value that enterprise architects should be adding to the projects instead of maintaining the information. So with that, I was going to go into a quick little demonstration for our DI Connect for Evolve. So the first area that we're going to look at as part of the demonstration today is our Erwin Data Intelligence Suite. So we are starting from the data governance perspective so that I can show you the types of information that we're actually collecting within the tool, just as a quick overview. So the product itself comes with multiple different modules that allow us to look at information from different perspectives. The first area is our business glossary that handles kind of putting business context around all of our data assets and provides the traceability down to the actual physical elements. Also within our product, we have our data catalog. And really it's within our data catalog that we're pulling information out of and putting it into our enterprise architecture tool itself. And if we quickly take a look within our metadata manager, this is where we can actually catalog all of our data systems going throughout our corporate landscape. And not only are we documenting it, we're also automating that documentation. So these are not just systems that we're manually putting information into our tool in. We're actually connecting to those systems so that we can actually scan and understand the information and keep it up to date on a timely basis without us having to do anything. So you can see in my environment, I have lots of different systems. I'm going to specifically focus in on our enterprise data warehouse. And you can track multiple different environments and pieces of information of that system. So you can have a production environment, a development environment. You can scan and maintain all of those different environments within our system structure. And if I quickly open this up, we'll see that we can actually go into the details of what's being contained within that environment. So these are all the table and column names, the unique properties. If there's PII or any other sensitive information, the tool is smart enough based upon kind of configuration to go in, document all of the data assets, understand if things are actually sensitive information, and get all of those physical constructs that are contained within the file, repository, or whatever source that we're bringing in. On top of that, we also have the concept of mappings, and that really gets into that data in motion I was talking about, to where we can also go into our mapping manager and understand from a system perspective how data is being exchanged or transformed within the data landscape. So I can go into one of these mappings, and I'll just pick one at random here, to where we can start to look at source to target mapping. And this can be from a purely graphical perspective, or it can be from a specification perspective. But what we're seeing here is the actual movement of data that's been specified by this particular mapping between systems. And this isn't just from a table level perspective, it's from the unique column level metadata perspective that we are actually tracing out where information is flowing to and where it's coming from. So the mapping manager allows us to document that data in motion. And once again, this can be manually put in, or we can automate that process through our smart connectors to where we actually automatically do this documentation for you. And then going back to our metadata manager, we can go back to our system and see how these things tie together. So if I go back to my enterprise data warehouse and select one of my production environments, I can actually see the end-to-end lineage of this particular environment. So I can see my system in question and then all of the touch points going across the corporate landscape. So where the information is coming from, where is it being staged, what transformations are taking place, and then ultimately who is consuming it. In this case, we can see we have some BI reports that are consuming specific pieces of information. Now, this is a lot of detail, but you can start to imagine that this is all the interconnections that we as enterprise architects start to document at a top level when we're defining interfaces, we're defining system dependencies. All of that information is what we spend weeks, months, sometimes years to go off and document, pulling in different subject matter experts. Sometimes the information is correct, sometimes it's not. So this is the actual true information that we're starting to document based upon scanning the systems and scanning the information as it's actually being moved from one system to another. So just to kind of pull the thread a little bit longer here, right? So we can dive in even further on any specific piece of information. So I can actually see where this data asset is going to from a system perspective, and I can drill in even further to say, okay, maybe I just want to focus on this particular interaction. To where here I can see just these two systems and how they interact, and I can drill in even further and see how that data is transformed. So not only are we exchanging information from one system to the next, we're also transforming that information. So we can actually start to capture all of the transformation rules and business rules on how that data is exchanged and validated going from one system to the next. So lots of information being tracked within the data intelligence platform. Now I'm going to switch over to our Evolve platform, and we can start to see how that information is utilized as it flows over from one system to the other. So logging into my Evolve platform, which is a enterprise architecture and business process modeling tool environment. So what we're looking at here is our Evolve platform. It is a user and role-based environment that is highly configurable, as a lot of people know. And really it's about documenting multiple levels of architecture going throughout the organization. Now, utilizing the information that I just showed you from the data intelligence suite, we can start to kind of reduce the time to value for documenting applications and providing executive stakeholders top level information by integrating that data into our platform. So we have our EDW environments within the Evolve platform. And once that information is flowed over into our enterprise architecture repository, we can add lots of additional information that we don't necessarily care about or necessarily track in the data governance space. So we can start to look at matrices, descriptions, access types, life cycles, costs of the information. So a lot of things that typical enterprise architects need to consider when providing reports and analysis to make decisions on, retiring an application or improving an application. So very top level information, but then we can start to get into architecture artifacts to where, based upon that data that we brought over from our data governance platform, we can start to auto-generate our application interface diagrams. Once again, this is at a very specific focus of a single application, but we can start to see all of the complexities and the dependencies from a system perspective that came across from the data intelligence environment. Not only is it bringing across the dependencies, but we're also tracking the specific mapping. So we're bringing in all of those details of the information that's being exchanged, how it's being exchanged, and what are the actual system touch points that are occurring. We link back off to the data intelligence suite environment. So if people want to navigate going between their enterprise architecture and their data intelligence suite environment, we can do so. But more importantly, we're starting to track all of the interdependencies. Now, this starts to drive lots of different types of views that we can produce as enterprise architects real time. So once again, these aren't diagrams that I've personally drawn. This is the system itself drawing these diagrams and these analysis points based upon the information that has been integrated from our data governance platform. So we can also start to look at impact analysis views that will actually trace the entire architecture based upon the source system, the information that's being exchanged, and the destination systems and the infrastructure they're actually hosted on. So now we're getting real-time impact analysis based on information that has been scanned going across those real systems. So this didn't come from a subject matter expert, it came directly from the system and the interactions that system is having with other systems. So no longer are we relying on manual documentation, we're actually relying on automated documentation. So just to kind of go into some additional details that we're starting to track. So within your enterprise architecture, you also get that full listing of data exchange information. So we will have all of the data attributes, the columns, the compliance items, all of that flows across for us to do analysis on within our environments. We can apply business rules over the data assets. So we're also tracking data stores, so where that information resides. And then you can also start to overlay CRUD permissions over the data assets as well. So we get to take lots of information from our governance platform and we start to overlay a lot of the enterprise architecture concepts we're tracking today. But now there's an aspect of it that we don't have to manage as architects, and a lot of aspects that start to get automated throughout the life cycle of EA itself. So like I said, this was a very application specific focus for this part of the demonstration, but as we start to build out all of the applications and that information flows across, we're starting to build out the entire landscape of our application architecture. And so automatically, we will be able to start to document the entire ecosystem at a very top level. So we can start to see the roll up of all of these system interactions and data flows in one single view. So at a very top level, now that we have all of this integrated information going across our real systems, we can auto-generate the ecosystem of applications and all of the interconnectivities. So previously, this is something that enterprise architects would never be able to achieve or maintain or consume. But within this real-time environments, we can now get real documentation of all of the systems and all of the real life interfaces going across the board. We can look at it from this very top level and see all of the interactions, or we can take chunks of it and section it off for presentation purposes. The point is that we do not have to create these products or maintain these products anymore because the tools are doing it for you. It's going to greatly reduce the cost of your initiatives, and it's going to greatly increase the reliability of information you're maintaining within your repository itself. So not only does it start to give you all of the interdependencies and impact analysis kind of data that you would need to make decisions, but now you can start to roll that information up even further into your corporate dashboards, corporate heat maps, and landscapes that you end up presenting to executives. So in this example, I have a capability landscape with my applications overlaid it. You can see how information is being displayed from a heat map perspective, and we're tracking lots of information, as many of us do within EA, on these applications. But depending on compliance items, complexity assessments, we could start to pull that information in from the data governance platform and have real data-driven analysis going over our artifacts to where information about if something's a GDPR compliance item, if something is PII, if something is a SOX compliance area, that information can be automatically documented within our governance environments and then completely flown in to our heat maps, our process maps, whatever you need it to flow into, so that it starts to be real actionable information that's being overlaid each one of the diagrams itself. And then obviously this starts to make our dashboards that much more realistic and that much more reliable. So you can start to do things like understanding data markings. You know, if something's classified, unclassified, can you release it to folks outside of the organization? this information is a lot to maintain and keep relevant. So being able to tie this into the governance area, we get to automatically get the benefits of that information flowing into our EA platform itself. So just like data markings, you can do things like compliance, GDPR compliance, look at applications criticality, analysis. All of this information is now real-time, accurate, and up to date so that you guys can start to make better decisions and making them faster. So in summary, integrating enterprise architecture and data governance shows real value. Not only are we able to integrate the application inventories, the interface descriptions, we can auto document the application dependencies and information lineage. It really starts to get into understanding regulations, compliance, processes and controls, and ultimately we're generating true impact and traceability analysis based upon the system information and how the systems are interacting with each other. In a sense, we're really starting to explore the complete automation of enterprise architecture documentation through understanding the data that we're governing within a company. It shows real value from reducing kind of cost of resources. It's reducing, the complexity of the information we're tracking, and it's really improving the quality of the information and the analysis that we're providing to our stakeholders. So with that, I'm going to open up the floor to questions.
Okay. First of all, great presentation, Tony. Thank you so much for presenting for Insights 2020. A couple questions on the line here. Our Evolve repository is tailored to our specific project requirements. How flexible is the integration between the two products and how the information gets stored?
That's a great question. Most of our clients, they usually start off with a framework or a meta model in mind, and then as they grow over time, they modify the back end to meet specific requirements. That's one of the most powerful aspects of our enterprise architecture platform is the configurability of it. When it comes to the actual integration going between the two products, it's just as configurable. So we can actually modify the integration points going between the two to actually store the information that's being exchanged in the manner in which you want to use them. So out of the box, we have standard definitions and meta model transfer of information going back and forth, but we tailor that to each client's meta model so that you can use it in a way that fits your organization and meets your requirements.
Okay, thank you. This session was very focused on enterprise architecture integration. Does this also tie into process management activities?
Absolutely. So as you can imagine, process is a big, component of enterprise architecture, but from the discipline of process management and process improvement, it usually goes down to a level of detail that enterprise architects don't necessarily want to consume. That being said, from a process management and improvement area, access to data throughout each steps of your process, understanding that interaction is very important. So just like you're able to auto-generate, application diagrams, tie that sensitive information to analysis pieces, you can also tie the information that we're pulling from each one of the data sources to the processes, the steps, the roles that are actually, using them to do that type of analysis. So absolutely 100% you can tie this into your process management framework.
Okay. All right, that's all the time we're going to have for questions right now, but Tony will respond directly to anyone who asked questions after the event. And with that, again, thank you, Tony. Much appreciated. Would you mind going to the next slide? Okay, just going to do a quick preview of what's coming up in this track. Next up is EVO3, Creating Value by Understanding Our Business, with Carl Etherington of HSBC. And tomorrow, after the morning's keynote session, Scott Lawson of QAD will be presenting EVO4, which is Building a Great Enterprise Architecture Practice. Of course, we invite you to check out the sessions offered in our other 2 tracks, all available after the first run, on demand for you to watch at your convenience. And be sure to head over to our networking lounge to connect with other data professionals or visit our solution booths and ask our experts some questions, and even see the latest customer reviews showcased at the IT Central Station booth. We hope you continue to enjoy our time with us at Erwin Insights 2020, and thank you for joining us.